what's up, guys? My name is Millennial Smark, and welcome back to the 100 Greatest Wrestlers of the 21st Century, kicking off number 60 with MJF. Now, like I said, I try not to use any kind of recency bias with this, and I know some people are going to probably even have a problem with me putting MJF up there. It's funny. He's probably going to be one of the only wrestlers on this entire list where I can actually hear an argument from both sides, where one side of the argument will say you put MJF way too low, not understanding the whole point of recency bias, and you have the other side are going to say, I'm putting them up way too high. Once again, they're going to probably try to invoke recency bias when he's just actually done so much within the last 5 or 6 years within AEW. He's one of their biggest heels. No, he is their biggest heel. He is their biggest heel of all time in that company's history. And quite frankly, you can make an argument that MJF is probably top 10 best heels of this entire decade. That actually could be a strong argument. Maybe even top 5 if you want to go that far. And that's why he's that high on this list. Never mind his work as far as his character is considered. He's one of the few talents who, at the very least, I can't say all the time, but 95% of the time, MJF is always on. MJF is one of those wrestlers where you just can't shut up, right? You can't just say, hey, guy, method acting is pretty gay. No, he's one of those guys. He's going to take what he brings to the ring, he's going to leave the ring, and he's going to continue being that guy that he was inside of the ring in front of people. And I always appreciated that aesthetic about wrestlers, right? It's very old school. Some people may even say to themselves he might be taking it too far. You know, some people may say that he might be taking himself a little bit too seriously. But I feel like that lack of attention of trying to take it too far or trying to take it too seriously, it's a huge contributor to the downfall of professional wrestling, right? And here you have someone, MJF, who is younger than probably like, I don't know, I want to say 90% of his contemporaries who still have not reached his level yet. And what does that tell you? Who's doing what wrong and who's doing what right? If you have a guy who probably has one of the biggest contracts today in professional wrestling and he's not even 30 yet, being able to be this skillful on the microphone as far as his work is considered, the caliber of his character, his resume, tell me, and on top of that, he's a solid in-ring talent. On top of that, right? Actually, above average in-ring talent. MJF, when he wants to go, he can fucking go. I will go as far, and call me crazy. I dare you to call me crazy because you know I'm telling the truth when I say this. I would go as far as to say that MJF is absolutely the Ric Flair of this generation. There, I said it. And you know damn well you'll be saying the exact same thing too if he was wrestling in WWE. You only not want to say it because you want to play tribalistic bullshit games and he's in AEW. And mind you, when I look at MJF, he can do some things wrong that I don't like. And in other cases, he does a whole damn thing. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me where I'm telling lies. Look at the caliber of feuds he had with the likes of a Cody Rhodes in AEW. With a CM Punk and AEW, with the likes of a Hangman Adam Page, right? Right, the list goes down. Darby Allin, John Moxley, if you even want to go there, Samoa Joe, obviously, right? Now, one can have a bit of back and forth if you want to talk about this feud with Adam Cole, but you get my point. You catch my drift here, right? Dude has been uber consistent on everything he fucking touches. Uber consistent, and he's so young. That's the part that I think needs to get through everybody's brain, is that he still has decades to go. For most people, they haven't been aware of MJF for maybe about 5 or 6 years. Mind you, he probably hasn't even been doing, he might have just hit a decade since he started doing all this. People forget, Buddy is not even 29 yet. He will be 29 in March. That's what, actually, no, he is 29. I'm sorry. He'll be 30 in March. I apologize. I think he was born in 96. Yeah, that's where we're at right now with MJF. A guy who's just about to hit his 30s and he already created all this. How do you not put him high up on the list? As a matter of fact, I feel like maybe people might even have a stronger argument that he should be higher up on the list than people who are going to make the dumb fuck argument that he should be lower on the list. Dude is one of the star attractors of AEW. Dude is arguably one of the biggest heels in the business, and for sure the biggest heel in AEW currently at the moment. Dude has all 5-2s for the most part. Where? Like I said, he's about as close to Ric Flair from as far as compared to everybody else in this generation. Then who else? Like, who else meets that criteria? Just be lying to yourself to say anything otherwise. But absolutely, MJF is number 60 on this list. And you can't tell me anything else otherwise besides that, which is the truth. Alright, so for number 59, I do have Asuka. Kana, however you like to refer to her. I have her number 59 on this list. And it's more so just because of her impact on women's wrestling as far as that dominant figure. You know, I feel like, yeah, you could go back in the past with TNA. We talked about her. She's on this list with Awesome Kong or Karma, Amazing Kong, however you like to refer to her. You go back, you know, even further, Aja Kong, all these dominant women wrestlers. And, you know, you had some of the more flashier ones, like a Kyoko Inoue. You know, you had like obviously like a Manami Toyota and all those women and stuff like that. And I feel like Asuka is both of that intertwined into one. She has the fear, if that's what you want to call it, right? I think she demands that type of respect at the level of an Aja Kong, you know, to the point where she could be that short, but you can look at her and you could fear her just as much as you will fear the next woman. Talking kayfabe here wise, maybe even real life, I don't know. And then you have on the opposite side, obviously with the Manami Toyota comparisons and stuff like that, with her size, the way she moves, all that other kind of stuff, the credibility that she brings to her matches. I think it's actually, I look at both of those things, those domineering personality traits and characteristics, and you intertwine it into one and you bring that into the WWE atmosphere. And most people have never seen that before. You know, that type of dominating, you know, focus centric on the Asian wrestlers. It was just something that was relatively new. Now, like I said, I don't like to bring NXT into equation because I want to focus directly on the main roster, but how do you not bring up her work on NXT? That's what got her even noticed before she got to the main roster, right? How dominating she was. She was undefeated her entire time in NXT. She was undefeated as the women's champion. She had to drop the NXT championship, the NXT women's championship, because she was so dominating. No one could beat her. She left the NXT brand as a women's champion. The quality of matches she put on, obviously most notably with Ember Moon, Athena. Crazy matches. I don't like to bring NXT into the equation, but I cannot not talk about that part when discussing Kana, when discussing Asuka. She comes to the main roster, and you can argue that, you know, she was not the same necessarily compared to what she was in NXT. That's an obvious observation, right? You know, you can even make a strong argument that her losing to Charlotte in the manner that she did at WrestleMania just kind of created this whole energy and atmosphere that literally brought down Charlotte, because people kind of felt like that Charlotte was not on the level of an Asuka, and how dare you put her over in such an inconsequential manner. That's how much respect people had for Asuka and what she did for the women's evolution or revolution, or however you want to call it. That's the respect that they gave to Asuka. And then you talk about what she did when she came to the main roster, even afterwards, and even before. You know, she won the Royal Rumble, right? You know, we're talking about accolades such as former NXT Women's Champion, true that. Former Royal Rumble winner, true that. Former Money in the Bank winner, true that. Multiple time Women's Champion, World Champion, true that. Former Tag Team Champion, true that. She's done it all besides win the mid-card championship belt. She's wrestled all over the fucking world. Wrestled at multiple main events, wrestled at multiple WrestleManias. You know, been in probably every goddamn match you can probably think of, stipulation-wise, right? Wrestled all the women that you could possibly think of. And like I said, is her career right now in the spot that it should be in? Neither here nor there. But I will say, for someone who started 10 years ago on NXT, and for her to now be closing in on her mid-40s, and WWE is still using her pretty prominently for the most part, goes well and beyond what I'm saying. They're showing her just as much respect as I'm saying right now for you guys to understand why I put her so high up on the list. She was a figurehead right next to the Four Horsewomen. While the Four Horsewomen had to rely on each other in order to get themselves over, rightfully so and respectfully, Asuka didn't have any of that. Asuka was a leading figure with the women's revolution just simply because she's Asuka. And what more can you say outside of that? That's not just me saying it. That's what WWE is telling you 10 years later in her mid-40s. You tell me how many women are in their mid-40s, still in their prime, still being pushed in the manner as to how Asuka's being pushed. I'll tell you how many. You got it. For those with the benefit of flash photography, I would like to bring to you number 58, Edge and Christian. Now, you guys had to figure they were going to be on the list, right? One of the greatest tag teams of all time. I can't leave Edge and Christian off the list, if for nothing else, their impact on tag team wrestling. Now, there is another team on this list, which I'm pretty sure you guys are aware of, which I will get more into depth as far as the influence, as far as the TLC matches are considered. I'll leave that for them later on down the list. But in particular for Edge and Christian, on top of the TLC stuff, is the fact that I think people don't recognize. And look, you can look at each pairing of any tag team that you could think of. There has never, ever been a more successful tag team than Edge and Christian. And you say to yourself, no, Devontae, I could think of 1,000,001 more successful tag teams than Edge and Christian. First off, you're over-exaggerating. Edge and Christian is one of the best tag teams of all time. You're not thinking of 1,000,001. And secondly, I'm not talking about as far as their run as a tag team. I'm talking about them separately. You cannot tell me. For people who bring up the Shawn Michaels, Marty Jannetty metaphor all the time when discussing tag teams who break up, whenever you say that, you always say to yourself, like, okay, Shawn is the person who obviously is the, went on to greatness, and the Marty Jannettis of the world, of the team, they're typically the ones who ended up wallowing in misery, right? They ended up being jobbers. They ended up falling out with the company. They don't get a lot of work. Yeah, right? When you think of that, obviously you look at Brett and Jim and the Hart Foundation. You look at Brett and Jim. Brett is Shawn. Jim is Marty. With all due respect, you look at Jay and Jimmy. It's pretty obvious that Jay is Shawn and Jimmy is Marty. Right? With all due respect, he might have had a big career in Japan, but obviously, Davey Boy, British Bulldog, was Shawn, and Dynamite Kid was Marty. Now, in any other situation, when you look at Edge and Christian and his career and his accolades for any other wrestler in that position within the tag team would easily be considered a Shawn. That's how crazy Christian's career is, that his accolades in any other scenario would be considered a Shawn Michaels. But Edge has had such a legendary impact on the industry, he's considered the Shawn, and Christian, by default, is considered the Marty. The Marty is Christian fucking Cage. That's what I mean when I say they're the most successful tag team of all time. When Edge is considered Shawn and Christian is considered Marty, that just shows you the impact that their wrestling has had on the business and on their own careers as well, right? From showing up as the Brood originally, Edge and Christian were not even initially partners when they first showed up in WWE. They hated each other. Well, Christian hated Edge. Edge was trying to reconnect with Christian, but Gangrel kept blocking them, right? And to see the growth, and I said this word a lot, right? This metaphor, I kept calling superstars Madonna. I can't think of a better description than calling them Madonna than any other team. Think about the fact that you had Edge and Christian who showed up as essentially goths, right? Vampires, if you want to take it to that extreme. And then they do the stuff with the Terry Invitational Tournament. They turn heel right around the early portions of 2000. And now they're like surfer dudes, right? They're like, dude, where's my car, right? They're like that. They're I don't want to say teen idols necessarily, but they're like that. They're just retards, right? Like, that totally reeked of awesomeness, man. Like, they're both two Shaggies from Scooby-Doo. Which is crazy to think, because theoretically, if you can say the closest, for people who didn't live through the era of Edge and Christian, you can make a comparison. Edge and Christian's tag team is about as close to something like a Matt Riddle, without the constant, emphasis on getting high. take the 420 element out of Matt Riddle, that's Edge and Christian's tag team as far as their gimmick. So it's already crazy enough that they're working with that kind of gimmick, where in any other instance, that'd be considered a babyface gimmick. But for them to take the doofus idiot role and then spin it and make it a massive heel run. I mean, seriously, there is almost, as far as America is considered, there are very few teams that I could think of that got as massive heel heat as a tag team than Edge and Christian. And the fact that they were able to be a tag team and carry the roster of tag team wrestling along with the Dudleys, along with the Hardy Boys, and them focus strictly on them as a tag team and get prominent spots as a tag team. Nowadays, you have to put togethers there, right? Unless your name is the Usos or the New Day, and more in particular nowadays, just the Usos. Unless your name is the Usos, you will have to get prominent fucking put together people if you want to justify them getting a certain spot on the card. No, Edge and Christian did it as a tag team. And the rest of the division that fall behind them did it as tag team wrestlers. I think that in itself should speak more to the credentials than anything else as to why they're on the list. But I'm pretty sure if you're a wrestling fan, I don't have to explain to you why they're on the list. It's pretty obvious. Because they're Edge and fucking Christian. Number 57 on this list, Bray Wyatt. One thing I will always give credit when it comes to Bray Wyatt is someone who knew he was fucked, right? He came to the main roster. You've seen how Bray Wyatt looked like. You've seen Husky Harris. You've seen the spot that he was in with the Nexus. I already put my David Otunga video out with John Cena last week if you want to watch that to hear more emphasis as to how fucked he was as far as his position goes on the main roster from David Otunga, a guy who was right next to him, a guy who teamed with him. Husky Harris had no smoke, right? He had no aura about him. It was over, right? He got sent all the way back down to FCW. And he had to work his craft. He had to work on himself. And for a guy to have literally no motion, like a Husky Harris, to revamp himself in such an extreme manner, to become Bray Wyatt, and to see his impact on the main roster, like not even 2 years, barely, maybe a year and a half, after showing up to the main roster, about 2 years, not say about 2 years, actually more like 2.5 years. It's a crazy turnaround. It's a crazy, 1 minute he's getting kicked in the head by Randy Orton, and if you don't keep up with NXT, the next minute, here comes this man with his fedora on, has his rocking chair with his 2 hillbilly friends, coming down the entrance ramp, and there you go. Those early promos with Bray Wyatt and Eli Cottonwood, you know, him talking about his daddy got a shrimping boat, and little old Bray couldn't even go to school. Or he went to school and he started reading Clifford the Big Red Dog. Like, that shit is gold. Watch Bray Wyatt's old promos in 2012. Those shits, that is some of the best promo work you will ever hear, right? And then he showed up to the main roster, like I said, made an immediate impact by going after someone like Kane. Had the Inferno match, right? Or whatever the hell they call it. And the tirade that he went on, right? Like, people forget that Yes Movement stuff with Bray Wyatt or with Bryan Danielson. How did you think how did you think it reached its next level? Who got him to that next level? January of 2014. That's what got him to the next level. Steel cage match. Right? The Usos versus the Wyatt family. Bryan Danielson. Daniel Wyatt. He has joined the Wyatt family. But did he? No, he didn't. He turned his back on the Wyatt family. He couldn't do it. He couldn't engage with evil and let evil represent him. No, he couldn't do that. And he went after Bray and the Wyatt family. And when I tell you, one of, if not arguably, the best reactions you will ever hear as a wrestling fan. Like Stone Cold Steve Austin level. And you can say, oh, you're Devontae, you're exaggerating. Just watch the video. You know what I'm talking about. You just don't want to admit it because I compared him to Stone Cold. Bryan Danielson sitting on top of the cage. Going, yes. Yes. And the crowd, you can hear how quiet they are in between each yes while he's on the cage. Even more impactful when he's setting up Bray for the running knee. The Busaki knee, right? Yeah. Yeah, who was opposite from him? Who helped get him to that next... Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt. And you can make an argument that throughout the years, he hasn't had much luck. Obviously, with the John Cena bullshit that happened. You know, he has some troubles that was happening within his personal life that kind of stopped him a little tiny bit, especially after the WWE Championship stuff with Randy Orton and Luke Harper. Brody Lee, rest in peace. Yeah, he has some troubles, right? He has some troubles with his ex. You know, life goes on, right? But what did he do? What did Bray Wyatt do? He came back stronger than ever, almost maybe a year later after 2018, after the Matt Hardy stuff with the woke bullshit. Came back as The Fiend. Redefined himself once again. To the point that you have 3 faces of Wyatt. Like the 3 faces of Foley, you have a 3 faces of Wyatt. You have the original Swamp Bray, right? You have Funhouse Bray. And here you have The Fiend. And you can say whatever you want, that the Fiend matches sucked, that all that other kind of stuff. Dude was over like a motherfucker when he actually debuted. Over like fucking Rover. And as the time started to go on, yeah, again, they started to ruin The Fiend. And yes, Bray did get released. And Bray did come back to a massive pop in 2022 at the Extreme Rules show. And yeah, stuff happens, and unfortunately, life happens. And Bray was never able to capitalize on that run. He was never able to capitalize on the Uncle Howdy stuff, the next evolution of Bray Wyatt, because, you know, he unfortunately passed away. But look at the impact that Bray Wyatt had in his short tenure in WWE, and his short life, quite frankly. Look at the impact that he had on the industry based off of that run right there. Gotta put him on the list. Got to. It's only right. And rest in peace to Bray Wyatt. JEFFJARRETT. It's GONNE. Gone. Yo, Jeff Jarrett. Now, obviously, you look at Jeff Jarrett. I know most people are going to probably admit it. They're going to think of 3 things when you think of Jeff Jarrett, right? You're going to think of, don't piss me off, right? You're going to think of, with my baby tonight, right? And an honorable mention could be his guitar. Sure. You could probably lump it in with my baby tonight. But the number one thing people are going to think of is how fucking insanely overpushed he was in the mid-2000s. How insanely narcissistic he was in the mid-2000s to put himself on the top of the card when wrestling for TNA, when all in all, he was just a mid-card wrestler. Like, Jeff Jarrett never could get over the hump from a talent standpoint as to where he was back in the mid-90s. He always thought he was something bigger than what he was, and he was validated that. His early run in 2000 with WCW, late 99, early 2000, he established that, right? Constantly fought for the World Heavyweight Championship, but it was during a dying time in WCW, but he did indeed have that spot, right? He did indeed go out of his way to help make a main eventer out of Booker T. That is true. That is absolutely true. But it's his TNA work that really gets put over the top, right? Jeff Jarrett and his TNA work is legendary for maybe all the wrong reasons, but he was still a top star. I talked about Bobby Roode, and I said he was one of. There is a strong case to be made that Jeff Jarrett is the number 1 biggest heel in TNA history. Again, for some of the right reasons and for some of the wrong reasons. People talk about the Triple H reign of terror. No, boys. You ain't seen a reign of terror until you actually seen Jeff Jarrett in 2002 to around 2010, arguably. There was a strong case to be made that Jeff Jarrett's push to the fucking top, it definitely slowed down around 2007, but he was still pounded and fucking pounded. You tried to put that man in the ring with Kurt Angle and try to justify that, right? You are out of your ever-loving fucking mind to think that Jeff Jarrett is anywhere near close to the level of a Kurt Angle, but they really tried to fucking make that a thing. They really tried to put him on a pedestal in that way. That's why he's on this list. Not because I want him on the list theoretically, because I kind of have to put him on the list because this nigga literally wrestled every single person in TNA when in reality, he didn't need to. He didn't. He's Jeff Jarrett. No one cares about Jeff Jarrett, but that's what he did. He wrestled AJ, he wrestled Joe, he wrestled Angle, he wrestled Sting, he wrestled Raven, he wrestled Rhino, he wrestled Abyss. All the who's who that's in TNA. He wrestled and he beat. And he was the biggest heel in the entire company. Fucking stops. Fucking runs completely goddamn ruined because of the overbooked nonsense that Jeff Jarrett participated in. Which is ironic because I just seen him maybe 2 or 3 days ago go out of his way to talk about John Cena and his story was dog shit. You're Jeff fucking Jarrett. You have no right to fucking talk. I'm supposed to be praising this man. I'm supposed to be praising. I hate Jeff Jarrett so much as far as his run in TNA. I hate Jeff Jarrett in general. I think he's so trash. But I got to be objective and I have to focus on what he actually did. That's why he's high. I can love a person and I can hate a person, but I have to be objective. And if you did something for a company and it just happened to be on TV and I see it and it was impactful and you had a consistent presence on television compared to other people where you objectively mattered more, then you gotta be on this list. As much as it pains me to put this loser on the list, he's on the list. God, Jeff Jarrett sucks so hard, but objectively, he's one of the biggest stars in TNA history and one of the biggest heels of the entire industry of the turn of the 21st century. A bigger heel in more ways than fucking one. 55, Kevin Owens. Now, this is another guy where it's like, I don't want to focus too much on the NXT stuff, more in particular the indie stuff, but I feel it at least has to be talked about, right? When you think of Kevin Owens, no different than when you think about Sami Zayn, who was also on this list earlier, immediately you think of Kevin Steen and El Generico. Whether they were a tag team, whether they were going back, heading up with each other in all kinds of matches, steel cage matches, ladder wars, and all that other kind of shit. That is who Kevin Steen was, and that's the aura he brought to WWE, right? And if for nothing else, I think one of the most respectable things that I can say about a Kevin Owens is that he was a part of that whole movement. Now, whether you like it or not, it's up to you, but he was a part of that whole progressing the movement that guys like Bryan Danielson and CM Punk started in 2011 with the whole indie stuff, right? One can even call him a huge influential factor as to why WWE even goes out of their way to hire more indie guys, right? Because it was guys like him. He broke the mold. He broke the stereotype. Look at Kevin Owens. Look at him. Bro looks like the architect of a Seth Rogen guy, right? Like he just looks like a Jonah Hill type. Just look at him. He looks like he should be in a Smash Mouth cover band. That's Kevin Owens. There is no way in God's green earth that Vince McMahon, a guy who was in love with Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior and The Rock and Triple H and Brock Lesnar, there's no way he's going to push a guy like Kevin Steen. That's what he did. Now, granted, Triple H was the one to bring him in, but Vince was the one to push him over the last 6 years before he actually, all the stuff started to go down. For the last 7 years, honestly. That was Vince. He broke tradition, and he used Kevin Owens to break tradition. He, with Kevin Owens' look, pushed to the main event. Mind you, this is not a Mick Foley situation. We're going, oh, whoa, what about Mick Foley? Mick Foley had character. Mick Foley had story. Mick Foley had to have 3 different characters to get over. Mick Foley had to do it on a roster where it was super limited. And props, I'm not taking anything away from Mick Foley. All props in the world, but I'm saying it was a lot easier for a Foley. Even though he had to make that road, it was still a lot easier. With Kevin Owens, there's superstars all over the fucking place. Vince didn't have to push a Kevin Owens like he ended up pushing the Kevin Owens. Yet he did. He's seen Kevin Owens, and Kevin Owens ain't too far from the same body type as a Mick Foley. And he pushed him. And Kevin Owens deserved it, because look at this guy. Like I said, not too far from a Mick Foley as far as body weight and size and stuff like that is considered. At the time, he was even bigger. And look at him hitting swantons, planchas, frog splash, all this kind of stuff. And he was known for being that athletic in the indie scene as well. He got pushed that hard, and he kind of broke a bit of a mold, right? He kind of broke down barriers for other big guys who could be super athletic to come on a main roster and prevail in that manner as well, right? Right? Look at people like Otis. You look at people like Ivar. Guys where I kind of feel like may have a chance in the future, and the fact that they even have this much longevity as is because of people like a Kevin Owens to break down that door for them to actually have a chance. Former WWE champion, former Intercontinental champion, former United States champion, former tag team champion, former main eventer of WrestleMania not once but twice in the most unconventional of ways, one being with Stone Cold Steve Austin and the other one being in a tag team match. We're talking about a guy who brought Stone Cold Steve Austin out of retirement in his first main event of WrestleMania. And the second main event of WrestleMania is main eventing the tag team championship belts and arguably the biggest story of this entire decade. Yes, Kevin Owens is that guy. He deserves to be in this spot, and he deserves to be on this list based off of all his contributions he's been doing with WWE for the last 10 years. One of the most prominent stars of the last decade. Right now, he's out with a neck injury. He's been out now for about a good part of nearly it's going on a year now, actually. He's been gone for nearly a year. What can I say, man? Hopefully he gets back. Hopefully, he feels more refreshed. But absolutely, Kevin Owens is one of the biggest stars of this entire decade. Now, I'm going to try my best to justify my point as to why I put Beth Phoenix this high up on the list, and why I feel like, even though she gets her kudos as far as being a part of that pre-Women's Revolution era, the whole Divas era, and why she was such a standout. Let me cook for a second, all right? Let me make you guys understand and give you a bit of a history lesson as to why Beth Phoenix deserves to be this high up on the list. See, first and foremost, you guys have the game all fucked up. Beth Phoenix, because I know most people think of Beth Phoenix, they think of the Glamazon, they think of her debuting around 2008, doing the whole Santino Marella stuff and all the goofy shit. Put that to the side for a second, even though I want to harp on that in a minute as well. She came onto the main roster, not in 2008, but in 2006. Some of you guys forget that Beth Phoenix, she started off by attacking Mickie James because Mickie James fucked up her life. The whole feud between Trish and Mickie James, and then Beth Phoenix coming into the ring and beating the dog shit out of Mickie James and saying, "You ruined my life." That's how she got started. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think Beth talked about this in the past on the podcast. She actually got taken off of television because she fucked up her face or something like that. She had to get surgery. Her face, parts of her face is actually legitimately, she can't move them anymore, right? Or she can't feel it. I don't know if she's not paralyzed. I think she's like numb. Her part of her face she can't feel anymore because some shit that happened in one of the women's matches before she went to OVW, right? But that's how Beth Phoenix came onto the main roster. Initially starting off, in my opinion, one of the most underrated, not talked about feuds in women's wrestling history, which is her feud with Mickie James. See, people immediately think of Mickie James and they go automatically to Trish Stratus. Rightfully so, because that is Mickie James' best feud of all time, in my opinion. That is her number one feud. Her number two feud, however, is with Beth Phoenix, and people do not give them enough credit. You look at what Beth Phoenix and what Mickie James were doing throughout 2008. On the opposite side, you have TNA, where you have Gail Kim and you have Awesome Kong tearing it up. On the other opposite side, you have Mickie James and Beth Phoenix keeping them up flow, going up against the TNA knockouts. And here's the difference. At least with Gail Kim and Awesome Kong, and yes, they had arguably the best women's feud of all time. Yes, they were probably the biggest stars, in my opinion, of women's wrestling at that time, you can make an argument that they had a very, very solid cast to help them out, right? A lot of women, TNA was very focused on trying to separate themselves from WWE by showing the potential of their women's wrestlers. And here you have on the opposite side with WWE, where they're completely fucking handicapped, right? They're now fully entrenched in this whole diva search stuff, right? They're fully behind the Candice Michelles of the world, right? They're now starting to get behind the Eve Torreses. They're getting behind the Kelly Kellys, the Laylas of the world, right? The Bella Twins. That's the Alicia Fox. You can go on and on and on, right? That is their main thing. They are getting rid of all of the women that actually helped them be prominent. Ironically enough, Gail Kim being one of them. The Molly Hollies of the world, gone. Jacqueline's of the world, gone. Jazz's of the world, gone. Victoria was gone like a year later, if not later on that year in 2008. Yeah, the writing was on the wall. Mickie James was released just a year later as well. But there you have Beth Phoenix. There you have Beth Phoenix. You can argue Natalya to a lesser degree, but Natalya was never pushed to the same degree as a Beth Phoenix. She was the most credible star from a look standpoint, from a wrestling standpoint, that they had on that main roster. I would make an argument, and I would say this is the equivalent of Shawn Michaels going up against the NWO. Let me cook. In the sense that Shawn Michaels going up against the NWO, having no one to rely on because you're trying to get people ready for that spot. Austin wasn't ready for that spot yet. Undertaker's doing this thing with Mick Foley. Shawn Michaels literally had nobody to help him out. Bret Hart is doing Lonesome Dove. He has nobody. He has to cook by himself against the NWO. And here you have Beth Phoenix by 2010, who has nobody to work with legitimately to have a solid, good match. All the women wrestlers are all Diva Search participants. All the women that I just named right there. All of them. They're all Diva Search participants. The closest person that you had was a Mickie James, and she eventually left in 2010. You had nobody. That was the direction that John Laurinaitis and Vince McMahon wanted to go into. It took Beth Phoenix to hold it down, no different compared to with Shawn Michaels against the NWO as to what she had to do going up against the TNA Knockouts, going up against Stardom, going against the New Japan Pro Wrestling women. It was all on Beth Phoenix. And she did her best. And she has some decent matches to pull out of most of these girls. Go look at the match with Kelly Kelly at SummerSlam, I believe. Go look at the match with her and I believe Eve Torres as well, right? Like maybe 2 or 3 months later with the fucking glam slam off the turnbuckle. She tried her best. And I think that is enough to put her on a pedestal compared to the other women who had it just as easy. And yeah, they're legends. Yeah, they're greats. But look at what they had to work with in comparison to what Beth Phoenix had to work with. If Beth Phoenix had more women to work with, I guarantee you most people will recognize how big of a star she actually was. But considering the amount of work that she had to do, even with the lack of tools and the lack of talent to help support her, I feel that she absolutely deserves this list. I think she does. Not to mention with the stuff with Edge later on down the line, obviously with the Judgment Day shit, and now she's in AEW. I think with her look, her history, what she had to do, her feud with the Mickie Jameses of the world, the stuff that she did with Natalya, she deserves to be on this list. And on top of that, she's a Hall of Famer. Like I said, folks, not gonna be biased. Not gonna be biased at all. Can't do it, man. But at the same time, for people who are going to probably look at this and say to themselves that Will Ospreay should be much higher. No, he shouldn't. Not in comparison to the influence, not in comparison to the work, not in comparison to the feuds and the rivalries and the power, star power, of the superstars that are above him of the last 25 years. Just because Will Ospreay is arguably the biggest wrestler in the world today does not eliminate all of what the other previous talent has done over the last 25 years. Like I said already earlier on. So if you're asking why is he this low on this list, he's only as low because of the actual wrestlers who have done more within the last 25 years. And don't get it twisted, there are some other AEW wrestlers who are above him who have done more in the last 25 years. So bite your tongue for a second, okay? But Will Ospreay, obviously, you look at his work within AEW and you look at his work within New Japan Pro Wrestling, it's second to none. Now, I'm not a guy who likes to talk about the stars and the oh my god, they're so good wrestlers, false finish for the 100th million fucking time, right? But obviously, who am I to speak about how everybody else should think about things, right? I have my own personal opinion as far as how I look at wrestling. And unfortunately, at least within my space, I am objective, right? I'm overruled by the masses and the majority within my own little space. And people love Will Ospreay. Mind you, I don't even hate Will Ospreay. I love some of Will Ospreay's matches, right? I like his match with MJF at the Wembley Stadium show. I think, quite frankly, his match with Bryan Danielson, I believe, I don't want to say Forbidden Door. I think it was at Dynasty. Either Dynasty or I can't remember. It was either Dynasty, Forbidden Door, or maybe Double or Nothing. One of those three shows last year. For me, that's probably one of the best matches of the decade so far, at least. I love his match with Bryan Danielson. He has had fun matches. He has had killer matches, and I actually do fuck with his wrestling style. My only thing is, even though I can fuck with your wrestling style, I don't like to see you do that same thing over and over. Again, pizza's my favorite food of all time. I don't want to eat pizza every day. That's my whole thing when looking at Will Ospreay. But nobody else wants to look at it from that perspective, and I understand and I get it, right? Does take away from the fact that Buddy, people can say what they want. I gotta make note of that. For the internet wrestling audience, for the Meltzers of the world, has arguably the highest amount of 5-star matches. If not, maybe he is number one of the highest amount of 5-star matches of any wrestler in the history of the business. Essentially saying for the IWC, he is their number one guy today. And to put that to the side, all that useless bullshit that people want to focus on, I do think, and I've said this plenty of times before, and mind you, he might have a bunch of injuries and he might have a little bit of mileage on him, but Will Ospreay is still relatively young. He's only like, what, I'm 33, so he's 32 right now. He might be turning, I think he's actually on his way of turning 33. You know, so he's still pretty damn young for the most part. And the sky is still the limit for the man. Now, he might want to slow the fuck down so he can be able to, you know, reap the fruits of his labor. But obviously, he still has things to fall back on. The charisma is off the charts with the man. Say what you will about his wrestling style. Say whatever you will about the bullshit 5-star matches. The charisma is off the charts. He's arguably one of the most charismatic wrestlers today in professional wrestling. You know, got the cool little theme song coming out with the colorful gear, the Ospreay, you know, all that shit. And like I said this in the past and I'll say it again. I stick by what I said. Will Ospreay is one of the most underrated guys when it comes to microphone work. When it comes to him speaking on the stick, Will Ospreay is pretty damn good. No one is comparing him to the likes of the greats. No one is saying he's a Dusty. No one is saying he's Flair. No one is saying he's Austin. No one's saying he's Piper. No one's saying he's Jake. No one is saying any of that. What I'm saying is he is fully capable to string a couple of words together, and he can do it with a modicum of emotion to get you behind what he's trying to sell you. And that's all that matters. That's all that matters in professional wrestling. Some people are exceptional and can exceed in that department, and other people can just do the bare minimum but still do enough to get it across. And unfortunately, we live in 2025, and the bare minimum for most people is good enough, right? And that's what Will Ospreay is. And I don't want to downplay him by saying the bare minimum, because he's actually solid on the microphone. He has the 5 tools. Maybe one tool is more than the other tool, but he still has the 5 tools. And he's one of the most credible wrestlers that they have currently in AEW. He is one of the biggest stars, if not the biggest star in AEW. And if for anything else, you can clearly tell that Tony Khan is so infatuated with the man that he's trying to groom him to be the face of AEW. All of this stuff is pretty obvious. Right now, he's currently out with a neck injury as of the making of this video. So he will be back. And when he gets back, Tony's going to put the World Heavyweight Championship on him. And there's a shot that Will Ospreay might end up being the John Cena of AEW, right? And for that, my words, hopefully don't age like milk, is a solid reason, if for anything else, why he should be on this list. Getting closer and closer to the halfway mark, number 52, Gail Kim. Now, I've talked about her enough throughout the series as is without even getting to her just as yet, so I'm pretty sure I kind of wore down everything that I already said, because there are so many wrestlers who have already faced her, where it's like I was kind of forced to talk about them prior to all this, and even the surrounding women within her era. But I'm going to try my best to put Gail Kim over right now, outside of the things that I already said. Let me see if I say some good stuff for her, okay? So, first off, the introduction to Gail Kim. Some of you guys may be too young. Some of you guys might not remember this. Gail Kim, her debut night was her winning the women's championship. Yeah, that was her debut night. It was in the Battle Royal. I believe, I could be mistaken, but I believe she eliminated, I want to say Molly Holly. I could be wrong about that. It could have been Victoria, but I'm going to say Molly Holly was the last person. Or if she wasn't the last person, that's who she won the belt from, or maybe that's where the belt was vacated. I can't remember the stipulation, the circumstances. But I know Gail Kim was the winner of that Battle Royal, and that was her debuting as the women's champion. And I remember when she first came to the main roster, right? Her whole thing was that she was trying to do this whole like Neo from Matrix, with the long jacket and the sunglasses. It was kind of cringe, actually, if you ask me. Which is even funnier because, Trish Stratus was the only one that did anything Matrix related. Her little dodge when people used to try to punch her and she bridges back, she used to call it the Matrish. Not the Matrix, but the Matrish. Kind of like, how Keanu Reeves used to do the whole little, backwards with the fucking bullets flying underneath him and shit. My point being this, so that's what Gail Kim was known for, right? And, unfortunately, they could have really rolled the high of that if they really wanted to. It's pretty clear that they had high hopes of Gail Kim when she first started on the main roster. But, she started to team up with Molly Holly. She was a heel for a little bit. I remember her and Molly taking on Trish and Lita in tag team matches. And, Gail wasn't really a thing. I mean, she was on Sunday Night Heat, but she wasn't really a thing on the main roster anymore throughout the duration of 2004. Like, she did some things here and there, but for the most part, she wasn't a thing, right? And I think she got released later on down the, maybe like a year, maybe exactly a year later, she got released, and that's when she went to TNA. And even within TNA, she wasn't really doing much at the very, very start, right? I remember she was a manager for AMW, America Most Wanted. Oh god, James Storm and Chris Harris, Wild Boy, what's his name? Whatever. It was Cowboy James Storm and Wildcat. I think Wildcat, right? Chris Harris. She was a manager for them. AMW was probably arguably the best tag team, maybe of 2004 and 2005. So she got some stuff going with that, right? Maybe did some stuff here and there with Jacqueline Moore, Miss Tennessee. And then 2006 happened, and Gail Kim was able to remind people why, at that point in time, she was maybe the best women's wrestler in the world. And like I talked about already, her work with Awesome Kong, I put it over so many times on this list. Gonna say it again while I have the opportunity. The best work of women's wrestling in North America of arguably the 21st century, even more so than the Four Horsewomen today. I find it really hard, obviously with the exception of few. I'm talking about just the work in general, generalizing it, right? Not like aggregating it to just one match. Well, I should get to that in a little bit, but focusing on strictly just the quality of work that she put out, I don't think anyone was as consistent as Gail Kim's run was at that point in time, in comparison to the likes of the Four Horsewomen or an Asuka or a Trish or an Lita. I think Gail Kim was the most consistent, right? Maybe there was one more women's wrestler outside of that we'll get to maybe later on in this list as well. Can't remember what number I had her at on. But there was probably one more wrestler who I can argue was a little bit more consistent. But that's the kind of worker that Gail Kim was, right? She put TNA in the Knockouts division title on the map. She was the face of a resurgence of women's wrestling that WWE wasn't focused on. She was the face of the precursor of the women's evolution, right next to a Trish, right next to a Lita. When you think of the Mount Rushmore of women's wrestling when it comes to the precursor of the women's evolution, it's Trish, it's Lita, and it's Gail Kim, the fourth person. You guys can argue amongst each other to decide who it is, but those three are going to be on that pillar. Maybe Awesome Kong, honestly, if you ask me, or maybe someone else on this list who I have to discuss. I don't want to say the name yet, but yeah. Then obviously you look at her later career with Taryn Terrell and how she killed it with her as well. That's probably like her second biggest feud in the company's history. Gail Kim was massively fucking consistent and a massive contribution to women's wrestling. Still to this very day. You know, every time you see Gail Kim, like 80% of her rhetoric, if it's not about politics, is talking about how she wants to push women's wrestling going forward. She takes that shit seriously. She takes that shit to heart. And she should be talked about and brought to light as far as that position goes and what that position merits. And the final spot before we get to the middle of this damn countdown. Finally, number 51. The Samoan Bulldozer, Umaga. Or as William Regal likes to say, Umenga. Yeah, of course, man. Of course. Kind of like a Bray Wyatt situation, if you ask me, and unfortunately more ways than one. Umaga was another guy, right, that got over massively when he originally, like, he came into WWE as a part of 3 Minute Warning, right? You know, Rosie, Jamal, eventually Rico ended up joining them, and that was pretty fun, right? You know, Eric Bischoff with the, you know, always, you know, trying to find a way to say the phrase 3 minutes, and then they come out and they beat the dog shit out of everybody, in particular women, and old women at that too. Wait, did they beat up A Young and Fabulous Moolah? I don't even remember. I know they beat up the HLA girls. That was always fun. They beat up Lillian Garcia too. That was actually fun as well. But that was 3 Minute Warning, right? And to see them go away, I think they ended up going to actually no, I think Rosie stayed on WWE. I think Jamal, Umaga Eddie, I think he left and he went to go work for TNA. I think Rosie never left, although I could be mistaken about that. But he went to go work with TNA, revamped himself again, and he came back to WWE about 3 years later, right? And when he came back, boy, did he ever come back. Man, I remember when he had, like, people forget Umaga. He did not start off with the braids, right? Like, people see him and they think of, you know, Umaga with the braids, the plaits, right? I think even later on he had dreadlocks. No, Umaga came with the wild hair, like the blowout, right? And like the crazy fucking tattoos and stuff like that, along with the blowout. I always looked at Umaga. I always kind of felt like these boys, like they always kind of I think I said this before, they always reminded me of Terror Squad. I don't know why. He just, like Umaga, Rosie, the Usos, just the whole Samoan dynasty, they always reminded me of the Terror Squad. But Umaga came on, and man, oh man, did he make a fucking impact. We're talking about a guy who was undefeated, the Samoan Bulldozer. Oh man, with the guy Armando Alejandro Estrada. Oh boy, and just no pun intended, bulldozing over everybody. He was an unstoppable wrecking machine throughout 2006, right? And unfortunately, he did run into the John Cena train, and you know, you run into that John Cena train, shit gets derailed really, really quickly, right? It's like they built up Umaga just to get him to the spot where he takes on John Cena just to lose. Now, I will say there is a saving grace because John Cena and him had an all-time classic at the Royal Rumble in 2007, so there is something to get out of it at the very least. That's easily his best match of his entire career, and one of John Cena's best matches of his entire career as well, right? But people forget. Afterwards, Umaga did, well, I wouldn't say people forget. I think that's actually pretty notable. Actually, it's very notable. I wouldn't say people forget that. Maybe they forget that Umaga was a part of the match, though. When he took on Bobby Lashley at WrestleMania 23, and it was Vince McMahon who had Umaga's side, and President Donald Trump who had Bobby Lashley's side, right? He was a part of that. And he was just helping out Vince McMahon throughout his whole entire heel tenure when he was going directly up against Bobby Lashley throughout the spring and summertime of 2007. We're talking about a guy who had fantastic fun matches with the likes of Jeff Hardy, with the likes of CM Punk. Dude completely took over the Intercontinental Championship throughout that time frame also. Throughout 2008, he was just kind of in mid-card hell to a lesser degree, but still very impactful as far as what he was doing within the mid-card, right? And he came back in 2009. I don't know if he went to a drug rehab center at the time being and then came back. I don't remember, but he was gone for a minute. And that's when he had his final feud with CM Punk. And, he was starting to talk more on the microphone. And you could really see that Umaga was opening up and he was going to go to the next level with his character. And, kind of like Bray Wyatt, died way too young. Ended up passing away, I think, on his couch. I think he fell asleep and he had a heart attack in his sleep. And his old lady found him like that. And, he does have a bit of an offspring, though, obviously, with the likes of Zilla. Or Zilla? I think, right? Zilla. His son, goddammit, Zilla, whatever. I always fuck up his name. Fatu, who's pushing forward his legacy. So he has that. But Umaga was a beast. Umaga made such a huge impact. Like, I would argue that he was maybe the best wrestler of 2006, which is saying a lot with the likes of John Cena and Batista. But I think he had the most impactful statement to make throughout the year. And then the stuff that he, obviously got himself into with, like, the Battle of the Billionaires and, the stuff he was doing with Jeff Hardy. Yeah, I think Umaga is, he's that dude. And then obviously his influence still lingers as his legacy is there front and center of the bloodline in every iteration. So, rest in peace to the homie Umaga. And, definitely deserve to be on this list. We finally made it to the midpoint of the list. The top 50 biggest wrestlers of all time. Here we go, boys. Awesome. He came to play. And you can't take this away from him. You can sit here all you want to, and you can debate. You can go back and forth. You can suggest, no, Devontae, the Miz is not good. He should be much lower. Let's see. How many wrestlers on this list? You could probably count on your one hand. How many wrestlers on this list? Actually, maybe two hands. Who have started with WWE in the early 2000s, not 2005. He was on Tough Enough in 2003, right? How many people started with the company in 2003 and still are contracted to this very day? I'll wait. Well, Devontae, he was on the main roster in 2006. No, he wasn't. He was on the main roster technically in 2004, but we'll play that game. How many wrestlers have been actually on the main roster on television consistently for nearly 20 years? We can play that game too if you want to. Do you want to speak up? Can't hear you. Sound kind of light right there, right? Yes, tenure actually matters. Longevity actually matters, especially when that tenure and that longevity coincides with World Championship title runs, WrestleMania main events, all-time classic mid-card runs with both the Intercontinental Championship and the United States Championship, former multiple-time tag team champion. Yeah, I think it coincides with it, right? Call me crazy. The Miz, man, it sucks because I feel like Miz is going to be one of those guys where it's like, I feel like his work is never going to truly be appreciated until he's actually gone or retired. That's when people are going to try to give him his props and his kudos. You can give it to him now if you want to. You don't have to wait. You can give him his props and his kudos right now without having to, justify why you're waiting. He's GOATed status as far as this generation is considered. He is from his microphone work, from his actual work that he can do as far as bringing the best out of every superstar he works with, from his always putting everybody above him attitude, to the point where he fucks himself up. I mean, dude's finisher literally has no motion at all, period, point blank, at all. I mean, you think the fucking AA means nothing anymore. Look at the skull-crushing fucking finale, and that's if he even connects it, right? Dude is forever going to be a jobber to the stars, but guess what? That's why he's a millionaire right now. The Miz understands his role. He says to himself, I am a wrestler. I am a superstar. My boss asked me to do something that's wrestling related, and as a wrestler, I'm going to do my best to get this over. And he puts everybody above him and in the process ends up having some of the best matches of the night and having some of the best reigns of all time. That Intercontinental Championship reign he had around 2016, that's probably the best Intercontinental, as far as from an entertainment standpoint. And mind you, this is including everything, including that shoot promo he did on Talking Smack with Bryan Danielson. That Intercontinental Championship title reign, extending from him to Dolph Ziggler to Dean Ambrose, Jon Moxley, all of that, that was GOATed. That was the best championship reign, arguably, of the 21st century. Especially for the Intercontinental Championship. There's only a handful of people who you can point to who have had mid-card title reigns like that. I mean, I'm going to point to them later on in the list, but the ones that I've already mentioned, the MVP for an example, right? That's the kind of reign that The Miz had. That's the kind of stroke. That's the kind of career The Miz had. Always consistent. Always there when you need him. And on top of that, as far as what he actually brings to the table, dude is an annoying fucking heel. He's another goated heel, right, of this 21st century turn. Dude might arguably be the blueprint for someone like an MJF. I would not be surprised if MJF studied The Miz to get as annoying as he could possibly get. That's The Miz. That's his influence. Talking on the microphone? Do I have to talk about Miz on the microphone? You know he's good. You know he's solid. That's the legacy that he leaves behind. Why is he this high up on the list? You can make an argument that I could put him higher. I could easily put him in the top 40s. But there are some other people on this list that I feel deserve it a little bit more. You know, like I said, The Miz did kind of fall down in stock as the year started to go on. Hence why he's not a little bit higher. But The Miz in the early 2010s, the late 2000s, and had a career resurgence in the mid 2010s, and had a little small more bit of a career resurgence during the COVID period. Yeah, absolutely goated. If for anything else, you know his name, and that's more than I can say for even people on this list as well. Y'all Cena's ready to die? You get that reference? You know. Bobby Lashley, number 49, Choco Nugget Head himself. I'm gonna be honest with you. As big as Bobby Lashley is right now, the legacy that he's actually painted out for himself, I think it could have been bigger. Now, that all comes back to Bobby Lashley. It's his own fault why he's not as big as he should be. He's big, but I don't think people recognize how big he should be. Bobby Lashley should arguably be on John Cena, Randy Orton, Batista level right about now. He should be. And like I said, it's all based off of what he did to his own career, right? Everything falls back on Bobby Lashley, and he had to, come back stronger, bigger, badder than ever. And then, they brought him back down to size again. But nevertheless, though, Bobby Lashley showed up in 2005. That's the first time I seen him. I still remember his match with Nova. What was Nova's name in WWE? Simon Dean or some shit like that? That's when he was like the health instructor or whatever. That's when he destroyed him. And he almost immediately, after doing a couple more squash matches, almost immediately went into the United States Championship division, right? Feuding with the likes of Booker T, for an example. Feuding with the likes of Finlay, for an example, right? And he killed it in all levels, but it was all just preparation. That whole year, mind you, people forget, Bobby Lashley debuted, I want to say, a little bit before Survivor Series. Maybe like right after SummerSlam. It's when Bobby Lashley debuted on the main roster. So we're talking about September, October-ish is when he came in 2005. He was already going to ECW a year later in like November, December-ish, right? Around this time frame today, actually, is when he probably showed up on, probably November-ish, around like not too long after Survivor Series. He was already being primed to be a world champion. For people who like to call Vince McMahon racist and everybody racist in the company, it doesn't really seem like it to me. It seems like that they found this guy. He looked like a fucking massive machine. He had the background, the United States background, so he can be easily promotable when it comes to like holidays and stuff like that. I don't know, it's pretty evident to me that they looked at Bobby Lashley and they seen dollar signs. They didn't see black, they seen green. And that's how they pushed him. I already talked about this with Umaga, But eventually, after he won the ECW championship from Big Show, after the dominant run he had against the likes of a Raw Van Dam, a Test, rest in peace, a Hardcore Holly, for him to use that leverage to finally put himself into a spot where he's probably the highest person on the card from the ECW brand, being in that Battle of the Billionaires match and winning and shaving Vince McMahon's head, it was all just to prime him up. It was all just to use. Now, it came at the expense of ECW, was it to push a Bobby Lashley, which is probably why they were so pissed off of a Bobby Lashley, that they literally took a promotion and sacrificed that promotion to literally push this guy down everyone's throats. I mean, even to the extent where you had him side by side feuding with a Vince McMahon. Then the Great American Bash happened and you put him up against John Cena, a very underrated match, if I may say as well. And then he just ups and leaves. I think he ended up getting an injury or something like that, and he just leaves. He leaves. Only to show up in wrestling again in 2009? 2010, like a year or two later? I think he got released. I didn't see him on television at all anymore, period, point blank, after the whole situation, after the Great American Bash. That was the last match I seen from Bobby Lashley. He did the match with John Cena, and that was it, as far as what I can remember. And I think he got released a couple of months later, like in the beginning of 2008. And then he reappeared in TNA, maybe later on down that year, or maybe the following year. I don't know if it had anything to do with scheduling situations or anything like that. He might have even showed up in 2010. But I think it was 2009, 2008, because that's when he feuded with Scott Steiner, if I'm not mistaken. And he had a bit of another resurgence at TNA, right? Now, mind you, he was kind of off and on with TNA. He came back in the mid-2000s, 2010s, had that whole Bellator MMA gimmick thing going on, right? That's when he was at his most charismatic and best work as far as microphone work is considered. And then he comes back to WWE. And yes, the WWE run initially was complete and utter ass. I didn't know what the fuck made him put that stupid ass headband on. I know he was using it in TNA. I always hated that look for Bobby Lashley. He looked like a dickhead wrapped in a condom. To use all of that to start off his career with Leo Rush and the stupid ass sister thing he was doing with Sami Zayn, all this other fucking cringe, to eventually use as leverage to eventually get to a world championship spot in a dominant run within the Hurt Business, which is probably his most prominent run in that company outside of the Vince McMahon stuff. Definitely the most prominent stuff since he returned to WWE. And yeah, you can say that it was a roller coaster of a push as far as where he was initially versus where he was then. And you can argue that he was being booked to look like the next Brock Lesnar, which is crazy because I think he's like, if not older than Brock, like the same age as Brock. So it's kind of crazy to say overall. But then he eventually did, because of injuries and all that other stuff kind of to plague him. He got older. You know, he wanted his release from WWE. I think he ended up getting it, or he didn't resign, like a year ago. And he showed up in AEW alongside MVP, alongside Shelton Benjamin. And he has not yet made the impact that he made in WWE as to what he could be doing in AEW right now. And I don't know, maybe rightfully so, right? Bobby's got to be like, if he's not 50, right now he's turning 50 years old soon. He's at that point in life, you know, Twilight's getting closer and closer. But goddamn, what a career, right? To be billed off in 2005. Dude has had a 20-year career, and just a 20-year career on television at that. Yeah, dude did it all for the most part. Dude did it, former ECW World Champion, former WWE World Champion, former United States Champion, multi-time United States Champion. Did do it all. He did it all. Fought in the match with the President of the United States. What more can you say, right? But that's Bobby Lashley's run, and yeah, of course he has to be on this list. Remember when I said there was another girl on this list who was just as consistent as a Gail Kim? Here you have it. Right here. Put your fingers up in the air. Mickey! Oh, Mickey, you're so fine. You're so fine. You blow my mind. Hey, Mickey. Hey, by the way, you know I just learned that was the whole point behind her theme song? I didn't even know that. Now that I listen to her song, I actually, duh. But, the whole Mickey James theme song stuff, I had no clue it was based off of, oh, Mickey, you're so fine. You're so fine. I had no, it sounds kind of obvious when you say it out loud now, but Mickey James, people say that Victoria, which she was, I talked about this already when she was on the list, was the architect of the psycho, crazy, stalker, sexy gimmick. Yes, right? And everybody bites off of that. Mickie James as well bit off of that. But the thing with Mickie James compared to Victoria is that you can make a strong case that Victoria started it. She was definitely the architect, but Mickie James took it to the next level, right? She grabbed a woman's pussy and she pretended like she wanted to eat it. You can't. I love also like both crazy women went after Trish Stratus as well. Like, like Trish, what did you do to these women, bro? But yeah, Mickie James was on fire in 2006. Like, first off, she was sexy as hell, so that already brought her to the. I used to have such a huge crush on Mickie James growing up. She was so fucking fine. I mean, she still is fine, but I mean, like when she was younger, she was finer. Obviously, she was younger, right? But goddamn, the stuff that she did with Trish Stratus. Now, when you talk about landmark feuds for some of the older or for some of the younger fans out there, right? Some of the fans who were born like in the mid to late 90s or maybe even the early 2000s. Some of the fans who got into professional wrestling, say around that mid 2000 time frame or maybe towards the latter portions of the Ruthless Aggression era, this is your feud right here. This is what got you into women's wrestling. It was Mickie James and Trish Stratus. This is the feud. And I can't say I don't blame you. I can't say that I don't blame you. Mickie James and Trish Stratus absolutely fucking killed it in this feud. They absolutely killed it at WrestleMania too. That was one of, if not maybe, I mean, yeah, they had some back in like, you know, the early 90s and mid 90s, but I'm talking about to actually put significant prominence on, right? Like actually give a lot of attention to, right? Because the year prior to that, that would have been maybe Trish and Christy Hemme. But they didn't really care about that match because it's fucking Christy Hemme, right? Prior to that, that would have been 2004. No, they didn't care that much about Molly Holly and Victoria, right? Which is sad because that cost Molly Holly her hair. She had to do that just to bring some significance to that. 2003, triple threat match. 2002, triple threat match. The Trish Stratus match with Mickie James was the first women's match that actually had significant attention put on it. And for the women to go out there and to have a competitive match. Like I said, right? You can go back to the Alundra Blazes of the world back in the days and stuff like that. But it didn't have significant attention onto it compared to the rest of the card. Right? Or you can say that it has some significant attention onto it. But the women sucked when it came to the wrestling. Right? It wasn't good. Trish and Mickie had that first match at WrestleMania where it mattered and the competitors can actually deliver. Because now we're at a point where Trish Stratus is actually a competent, actually really good wrestler, right? She's killing it now. Now she's like fucking 4 horsewomen level as far as the wrestling, which is sad because she retired like a couple of months later. Retired at her peak of knowing how to wrestle. But Mickie James went on to do more stuff outside of the Trish Stratus stuff as well, right? Had a nice solid heel run going throughout 2006. Had a cool match with Lita at Survivor Series. She also had her last match. Lita had her last match with Mickie James, right? So essentially, both of the women retiring that same year, and Lita and Trish both feuded with Mickie James. And Lita was her last match on her original run. And like I said, it was women like Mickie James and Beth Phoenix, and occasionally Natalya, if they gave her an opportunity, who had to hold up that well. They had to hold up that boat, that sinking boat of women's wrestling. And compared to what the Knockouts were doing, they were the ones trying to steer the ship. The treacherous waters of women's wrestling. There were a lot of things that Mickie James had to sacrifice while getting to that point, competing with those Knockouts. Like, we're talking about Piggy James. Don't forget Piggy James. Her dignity. Completely fucking looked at and belittled, right? All because she wasn't anorexic, like fucking Michelle McCool and all the other women, right? Crazy, right? What they call fat back in the days is fucking wild. But that's what Mickie James had to sacrifice, and what she did later on with the TNA knockouts in the early to mid 2010s, what she did when she had a career resurgence when she was working with Alexa Bliss, working in NXT a couple of times. Mickie James is a huge, huge inspiration to a lot of the women backstage. The influence in regards to the gimmicks, right? She was the bridge between the precursor of the women's evolution to what the women's revolution ended up becoming. She was the bridge. It was her body that was bridging that gap. She was there with the Trishas and the Litas of the world, and initially all the stuff that she was doing with the Jacqueline Moores and the Molly Holly. So she was within that era. Maybe not there when they first left, but within that era. And this is not to even bring up the stuff that she was doing as Alexis when she was initially wrestling for TNA with Raven and CM Punk and all them people, right? She's been all over the place for over 25 years nearly, if not 25 years. She lives and breathes and is the embodiment of women's wrestling. Mickie James is a hardcore legend when it comes to wrestling. Not like Mick Foley, but like a hardcore country legend, because, you know, hardcore. Okay, whatever. But Mickie James, absolutely goated and absolutely deserved to be on this list. The Usos. I cannot wait to see how many people are going to say, Devontae, did you put the Usos over Edge and Christian? Like I said, I'm not going to play any bias here, man. The reason why I did that should be pretty obvious if you're a wrestling fan. The Usos did more for tag team wrestling in their specific group compared to what Edge and Christian did in their specific group, right? Their era compared to their era, the Usos did more for tag team wrestling. Now, I'm not saying overall. Obviously, Edge and Christian are more influential when it comes to tag team wrestling, just wrestling overall. But what I mean for the actual sport of tag team wrestling, as far as progressing it in treacherous times, that was the Usos. More in particular, they were together much longer. I think people forget Edge and Christian only had like a legitimate tag team run for like 2 years. Just 2 years. People forget in early 99, late 98, no, it was Edge and Gangrel who were teaming up. Christian was the cruiserweight or the light heavyweight champion. Edge and Gangrel were teaming. Edge and Christian didn't start teaming up for real till like the summer of 99. And they broke up around the summer of 2001. It was only 2 years. The Usos, however, were a team for about, before Jay went solo, they were a team for consistently about 10 years. On and off for about 15 years. And this is just talking about their WWE stuff. We're not talking about the stuff that they did before WWE, like with Booker T's Reality of Wrestling School, right? When they were with Ember Moon as their manager. Yeah, a little bit of lore for you there, right? Athena actually managed the Usos. But, yeah, that's the Usos were very pivotal when it comes to tag team wrestling. I talk about the women and what they had to do to keep the boat steering within the treacherous waters of professional wrestling, trying to push forward women's wrestling. What do you think the Usos were doing during tag team wrestling when tag team wrestling was even more deader than the women's wrestling? At least you can say you had women wrestlers. Like, what tag teams that you had back then that were actually legitimate tag teams that mattered? Who? Everybody was a put together. Every single team, for the most part, was a fucking put together. And the Usos had to ride that wave. They had to ride that wave. Either you were a put together or you were a tag team out of a stable. A legitimate, honest to God tag team did not exist. Not in the early 2010s, not in the mid 2010s. That was all off the backs of the Usos. And you could tell that was starting to get to them a little bit, right? To constantly be pushed and then de-push. 1 minute, here you are wrestling on Saturday Night Superstars on WGN, having killer matches. Like, people forget it, like that suplex off the turnbuckle that you see in video games nowadays. That was a Usos match. That was a Usos match with them and Trent Beretta, and I forgot the other two people in the tag team. I think it was Tyson Kidd and maybe David Hart Smith or something like that. I can't remember the actual competitors in the match. But that was the Usos at that point in time, right? That's what they were doing. Having to wrestle all these random tag teams that were here 1 minute and gone the next. It was very inconsistent. The most they ever got before that 2016, 2017 push with the Uso Penitentiary stuff, the most notable thing they did was the Bryan Danielson stuff I talked about earlier with Bray Wyatt in the steel cage. And that was because of Bray Wyatt and Bryan Danielson in the steel cage. It had nothing to do with them besides the fact that they were competing for the tag team championships at that time. Yeah, that's what it was. And then they had a makeover. And they turned heel. And they became to get super duper gangsta with the Uso Penitentiary stuff. And, them, one would cut a promo and the other one would cut a promo directly behind that, finishing off the last person's promo, which was super fucking creative. When I tell you the Usos were on point, it's crazy. I always say that about Jey Uso. I would never understand. It's like when they're both separate, they fucking suck. But when you bring them both together, it's fucking magic. You put a microphone in Jey Uso's hand, he has to rely on Yeet, which is crazy too, because it's like, Jey Uso was pretty decent on the microphone during the early portions of the COVID era. I don't know what the fuck happened to us, probably drinking so goddamn much. But you put a fucking microphone in Jey Uso's hand, he sucks. For the most part nowadays, right? He has to rely on Yeet. You put a microphone in Jimmy Uso's hand, no one's even fucking listening. Who cares? You put them both together though, and you get the Uso penitentiary stuff, that's where the money is, baby. That's where the liquid gold is, right? And them and their feud with the New Day obviously is worth talking about. I talked about it already earlier, but that was a significant prominence as far as what they brought to tag team wrestling. And obviously things didn't work out too well from a single standpoint for Jimmy Uso, but it did for Jey Uso, former Intercontinental Champion, former WWE Champion, former Royal Rumble winner. All of that this year, by the way. Dude was the star of the whole goddamn bloodline angle along with Sami Zayn. Arguably, those were the two. Sami Zayn and Jey Uso were the most pivotal members of the bloodline angle. That's what they brought to the table. That's what Jimmy and Jay brought to the table. And they're back teaming up again, which is cool. But they also had a match at WrestleMania last year, which obviously was one of the worst matches of all time. And, I definitely want to give credit where credit is due to those guys for pretty much having to ride the wave of tag team wrestling and having to work with people and say to themselves, like, damn, when is it ever going to be our turn? We keep getting fucked up here. And, it was them throughout the 2010s who kept tag team wrestling going strong for WWE as arguably the only legitimate fucking tag team there, right? Oh boy. Number 46. Jon Moxley. Now, let's talk about the more prominent stuff first when he was actually fucking good. When he was Dean Ambrose in The Shield. And how he came to the scene, credit where credit is due, The Shield, by far, easily, not even close. I'll just let you know right now, I don't have them on this list. The only reason why I don't have them on this list is because they never really necessarily used the Freebird Rule like the New Day did. You had one member who was perceived to be the leader initially in Jon Moxley, and the other two who were pretty much just, they were all a unit, but one was the United States champion and the other were the tag team champions, right? So they never really technically used the Freebird Rule. Otherwise, I'd probably put the Shield up there in the top 30, honestly, to be quite frank. But as an individual, Jon Moxley killed it as Dean Ambrose in WWE, right? Had the initial run with the United States Championship that he never fucking used or ever defended, quite frankly. And he grew from that, right? Seth Rollins obviously eventually turned his back on the Shield. We'll get more to him a little bit later on. Obviously, he's on this list. He turned his back on the Shield, ended up hitting Roman Reigns in the back with a chair. Jon Moxley seen all this, react, and from that point on, it's been on site ever since, right? Or so that you would think, right? Because Jon Moxley did have a bit of a separation from Seth Rollins after their initial feud. He did eventually have feuds with the likes of Kevin Owens and Bray Wyatt, and eventually he ended up getting the WWE Championship, right? And one of the more crazier instances, he won the Money in the Bank briefcase, I believe, in 2016, and Seth Rollins, who was out with a knee injury, came back, right? He ended up beating Roman Reigns in a one-on-one match at the Money in the Bank. So Roman Reigns came in as WWE champion. Seth Rollins beat him for the WWE Championship. And then Jon Moxley cashed in on Seth Rollins that same night. So all three members of the Shield were WWE champion, right? That was the goal. That was the intended purposes. We'll get more into the Shield stuff as I go on because Jon Moxley has more that I want to discuss. So I'll leave the Shield stuff for Roman and Seth later on in the video, right? But as we push on with Jon Moxley, as he goes throughout his WWE career, obviously he's the WWE champion. He starts to feud with the likes of AJ Styles and John Cena. Eventually he drops that championship belt and he goes after, I believe, the Intercontinental Championship for a little bit. had his match with Brock Lesnar. People always said that Jon Moxley was lazy, right? You go to the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast and immediately you start to hear what the things that he says and how he feels, and he just seems like a guy who just wants to be a dumb fuck, and if you don't follow his dumb fuck priorities, he calls you lazy. That's what he did to Brock Lesnar, right? Well, eventually, Dean Ambrose, dissatisfied with all the bullshit that he was doing, he ended up turning on Seth Rollins on the night that Roman Reigns announced that he had cancer. And he wanted to get mega heel heat from it. In actual retrospect, it was fucking horrible. The turn was lame, and the matches that they had were lame afterwards, right? They had that horrible match at TLC that year in 2019. Oh, no, that would have been 2018, actually. Had this Intercontinental Championship. I think he had another IC title reign, if I'm not mistaken, at that time. Maybe with Seth Rollins or something like that. And then eventually he left WWE, right? He had one more little final stand with the show. He left WWE and he went to AEW. And this AEW run was not any better, in my opinion, right? Now, he started off strong and almost immediately he failed miserably because all Jon Moxley wants to do is dumb fucking hardcore matches. And he's done dumb fucking hardcore matches with the likes of Kenny Omega, obviously with the likes of Darby Allin, with the bullshit shit that he was doing with, oh my god, Heyman Adam Page. I mean, all this dude does is hardcore, lame, dumb fuck matches, but objectively, he is a former, I think he won the International Championship, if I'm not mistaken, although I could be wrong about that. Maybe I am wrong. I'm pretty sure he won a mid-card championship, though. Whatever. He is a former IWGP heavyweight Japan champion, or maybe he's a United States champion. Obviously, he's a former multi-time AEW world champion. So things are just purely objective, and therefore they have to be discussed. But quite frankly, Jon Moxley fucking sucks to me, and I don't want to talk anymore about him. So we'll just leave it right here, right? Okay, I think this is good enough to talk about. We'll just stop here. 45. Finally, someone that I can actually discuss that I fucking respect. Not named Jon Moxley, because fuck Jon Moxley. Christian Cage, for all of my peeps. This goes out to you guys. All my peeps. Alright, man. There's a reason why I put Christian over Edge and Christian, because I feel like Edge and Christian was the podium and the platform for Christian to become Christian. At last, you are on your own. Now, Christian did have a strong run, obviously breaking up from Edge and Christian. The initial feud he had is obviously going to be with Edge, which he did win the Intercontinental Championship from Edge, coming out of his King of the Ring win and Intercontinental Championship run out of SummerSlam. He only had the belt for like a month, though. Christian and Edge, both. Edge won it for like a month, then he dropped it to Christian when they were like fake brothers, and they got the fake parents involved and all that shit. But Christian did end up slowing down a little bit, right? He didn't really have that much of a prominent role in the invasion angle outside of the stuff he did with Edge. I mean, yeah, obviously he had some matches on television, but, he didn't really start to get anything prominent until he had his match with DDP at WrestleMania X8 for the European Championship. And even then, that wasn't really too much focused on, right? It was more of a filler match, if anything else, right? But he did have some prominent spots throughout that. I think he won the Hardcore Championship at that time, too. Actually, on WrestleMania X8, if I'm not mistaken. And he started to push more with the Un-Americans and Lance Storm and, Test. And I think William Regal joined later on. But at that point, I think Christian already left and he started teaming up with Y2J, Chris Jericho. And this is when Christian really blew up, right? Because then you get around the mid portions of 2003, the Intercontinental Championship. It was retired for the time being after No Mercy with Triple H and Kane. And Christian ended up winning the returning Intercontinental Championship. I don't even know why they retired it to begin with, because they're fucking retards. That's why, right? But they brought the Intercontinental Championship back, and Christian won it at Judgment Day in 2003 in the Battle Royal. Ended up eliminating Booker T last, right? And they had a very underrated feud as well for the IC Championship. I think I talked about this a long time ago, back in like maybe 2019 or 2020. I had like my top 10 most underrated Ruthless Aggression era feuds. feuds, and I think I have it on this list, was Booker T and Christian, as a feud that no one ever talks about. But Christian killed it in that feud with Booker T, right? And as time started to go on, he started to build more credibility up, right? Had matches with the likes of Rob Van Dam, matches with the likes of Chris Jericho. Obviously, their feud took up the entirety of 2004 for the most part, which climaxed. I mean, you had their match at WrestleMania. All this was over Trish Stratus, by the way. And it climaxed in their latter match at Unforgiven for the Intercontinental Championship that no one ever really talks about, but that's a very, very fun match. And Christian was just trying to prove, he was really trying to prove a point that he could be a main event superstar, right? Because it was pretty clear and evident that the company favored Edge over him, right? And Christian started to push forward. You know, you had guys like Jericho still feuding with, even Shawn Michaels feuded with Christian for a little bit. They had a fun Intercontinental Championship match as well, right? Wait, did they wrestle for the IC Championship in 2004? They could have just had a one-on-one match, but it could have been for the Intercontinental Championship. But it was a fun match regardless, though. And Christian obviously had his, he reunited with Edge for a little bit in the beginning portions of 2005. That's when he had his bodyguard Tyson Tomko with him. And eventually he had the Money in the Bank match with, you know, with Edge and Jericho and Benoit and Kane and all them guys, which is to this day for me the best Money in the Bank ladder match of all time. Funny how the first one is the best one, kind of the Elimination Chamber a little bit. But eventually Christian did feud with John Cena, who he was really having it up to here with not being used or looked upon as a main event superstar, and he really wanted to prove that point, right? And he really thought he did prove that point by feuding. And because people forget, it wasn't Jericho. You know, when John Cena switched over to Raw, Christian was his first ever feud as the undisputed champion, right? Or I guess the WWE champion. That was his first feud after his initial feud with JBL was with Christian. Had that fun little triple threat match at Vengeance in 2005. And that was pretty much it for Christian, right? He thought maybe he switches over to SmackDown, he can do some stuff with, you know, Rey Mysterio or, you know, Booker T or something like that. All things fell apart. None of those things worked. And you would have thought I thought it was a given that Christian and, you know, Batista could have had a fun little feud for the World Heavyweight Championship, but WWE didn't see him that way, and Christian ended up leaving and going to TNA, right? Eventually having a solid run in TNA with the likes of Jeff Jarrett, with the likes of Rhino, with the likes of Sting, Kurt Angle, AJ Styles. I mean, he had AJ Styles in his group, the Coalition. People forget about him and AJ and Tyson Tomko. All that stuff was fine. And then he came back to WWE, did his stuff with ECW in 2009, had a fun little run with the ECW World Championship. And then, you know, eventually he got the World Heavyweight Championship in 2011. Feuded with Randy Orton, and probably the best feud behind Punk and Cena in 2011, which is saying a lot. And then the concussion started to happen little by little, and he had to retire for a little bit. Came back, knew he can do it. WWE didn't want to give him a run. He went to AEW, and this is where he's at right now, doing some of his other best work in his entire career with the, you know, constantly going after people's dad stuff. It's to show you how much of a chameleon Christian is, right? Look at all the stuff that I had to go down. Mind you, I skipped around and just highlighted some of the biggest spots of Christian's career. I can talk about some of the intricacies that I completely ignore in between all of that, obviously, right? Obviously. But I feel like that right there is the gist, if for anything else, as to why it's easy to highlight why Christian is one of the most prominent stars of the 2010s. Because look at his fucking work in the 2010s and the 2000s, right? Fucking crazy, especially in the 2000s. I still think it's a crying shame he never had a shot to go with the WWE Championship. If there was ever a shot, he could have had it for like a month or two, and Cena could have got it back in 2005. But one man's opinion. World 44, The Big Show. You got to think sooner or later he was going to be on this list, right? It's too bad, you know, you can't really combine the 90s stuff, because if I can't combine what he did as the Giant as to what he did with the Big Show, be much higher on this list, right? But then I guess he wouldn't, because then I'd be bringing into equation everybody else's stuff from the 90s. So maybe he probably might still be, he might even be lower. Who knows, right? But the Big Show made an obvious mark on WWE going throughout his career, right? More in particular in the 2000s. What he did when he started off in 2000, going after the WWE Championship, that right there should be something to just let you know how big he was, right? He started off the year I think either dropping. I think he dropped the belt to Triple. Either he dropped the belt to Triple H, or he retained against Triple H and then dropped the belt the following week to Triple H. But he was the first superstar. Him and Triple H were the first wrestlers to feud over the WWE Championship of the entire century. That was Triple H and Big Show. Quite frankly, they might even have the first ever world title match in the beginning of the century. And yeah, you can argue as years started to go on, Big Show's one of those wrestlers where it's like, you can have him in comedy spots, like he was doing throughout, you know, the middle portions of 2000 with the dancing and looking like a goofball with Rikishi, or the bullshit that he was doing in, you know, 2002 during WrestleMania X8 weekend and stuff like that. You know, yeah, he can be a bit of a goofball when he wants to be, but when you want Big Show to be serious, Big Show can get down with the get down, right? Obviously, I think most people want to remark on his stuff he did with the likes of Brock Lesnar in 2002. I think that's something worth talking about. You know, obviously the stuff he was doing with, actually throughout the early portions of the Ruthless Aggression era in general. 02 Big Show, 03 Big Show, especially when he was United States Champion, going throughout 04 Big Show, before he turned face once again later on down the line and then feuded with JBL and shit like that, right? That was Big Show. And mind you, between 2000 to 2004, we're talking about WWE Champion, United States Champion, Hardcore Champion. I think, did he win the Tag Team Championship belts at this time? Yes, with Kane, if I'm not mistaken. I think he won it with Kane. He did win it with Kane in 2006, but I think he had it in 2001 as well. Don't quote me on that. He might not have. I might have him confused with Albert, because Albert had it with Scotty 2 Hotty. But did Bishop have it with Scotty 2 Hotty as well? Whatever. My point being is, though, that's the kind of tenure and resume Big Show had even before his retire or his little hiatus he had in 2007 after the Floyd Money Mayweather shit, right? And mind you, that's not even talking about, like, you know, like I said, the tag team titles with Kane, and then eventually, you know, the ECW World Championship, right? Putting ECW on his back, a bet that no one wanted it on. But then he came back and he had his stuff with Floyd Money Mayweather at WrestleMania. Killed it with all that shit, right? Had a pretty decent run with Undertaker later on down the line that year. Did some stuff with Edge and John Cena at WrestleMania. Had a pretty solid match with Cena at Backlash. People don't give him credit. People don't give credit where credit is due to the Big Show. He might not be much now, obviously. Motherfucker's in his early, like, going towards his mid-50s with bad knees, and he's still, like, pretty damn big. Of course, it's not going to be the same. Quality of life probably might not even be the same right now. But when you talk about him at his athletic peak, not just talking about the giant stuff, but when Big Show could actually go, his matches were fun as fuck. I like Big Show matches. I think the matches that he had in particular with Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle were really, really fun. You know, and he had a bit of another career resurgence in the late 2000s with Chris Jericho and the Jericho stuff. You know, the stuff that he did with CM Punk and later on down the line and Alberto Del Fuego, you know, the killer matches he was having were with Mark Henry at that time in 2011 too. That was prepping Mark Henry up for that Hall of Fame stuff. Yeah. Yeah, and he had another career resurgence as the World Heavyweight Champion. Like I talked about earlier with Sheamus, had a fun match with him at Hell in a Cell. Had some pretty decent matches with Alberto Del Fuego. He did, man. Big Show was all over the place and he killed it. Helped put over stars like Braun Strowman later on down the line as well. Yeah. Yeah, when you talk about Big Show and his reputation and his name value and his star power, it gets no bigger than what the hell he was doing throughout the last 25 years or so. For sure, the last 15 years, between 2000 and 2015, we're just going to ignore all the stuff with the Authority. We'll just pretend that doesn't exist. But you get what I mean, though. Big Show is on point. And for sure, has to be mentioned on this list. And I've said that one more time. Mention on this list. Mention on this list. Mention on this list. Goddamn, I gotta use another closing statement. Fuck. Now, you're probably confused with this spot right here. And you're probably saying to yourself, especially, you know, if you've been seeing his matches as of late, or seeing his run in general as of late, how the fuck, Devontae, are you smoking crack right now? How in the fuck how in the god, Shinsuke Nakamura? Number 43, you got him that high up on the list. He's a fucking jobber right now in WWE. Exactly. In WWE. Like I said, every company who's mainstream is going to be on this list. You want to go back in the past and you want to watch his match with Tetsuya Naito at the G1 Climax. I think it was like either the finals or the semifinals in 2012 or 2011. You want to talk about the Wrestle Kingdom match with Kota Ibushi back in like right before he showed up the NXT? That was for the Intercontinental Championship too. That actually what got his name on. That's what actually got me to notice who Shinsuke Nakamura. I mean, I heard the name before because he did matches with Brock Lesnar like back in the mid 2000s. Yes, that's a thing. But like I never really checked him out before. Right, that Kota Ibushi match he had back in like right before he showed up the NXT, like maybe a year later or something like that. That was killer, right? Like obviously the match, the G1 Climax finals he had like back in that was in 2014 because I watched that with a friend of mine's. That was in 2014. He had that match with Kazuchika Okada, if I remember correctly. I remember watching that. We stole that video. His match with obviously AJ Styles, and no, I'm not talking about WrestleMania. That match sucked. I'm talking about this match with AJ Styles at Wrestle Kingdom back in 2016. Right before AJ showed up at the Royal Rumble. That was probably one of AJ Styles' last match, if not AJ Styles' last match before he showed up to the Royal Rumble, was his match with Shinsuke Nakamura. He has had a killer influential run in New Japan Pro Wrestling. I actually heard that Hiroshi Tanahashi wanted his last match to be, or one of his last matches to be, with a Shinsuke Nakamura, but they couldn't work it out. Shinsuke was actually, they just talked about this like a couple of months ago. Shinsuke was actually down for it because, you know, obviously, you know, Hiroshi is his friend and he wants to help out with him, right? But WWE, you know, that's a really big match. You just don't want to let your superstar who's under contract go over there and do something like that. I get it, understand. But that was a match that they wanted to do. And that just goes to show you the kind of competitor that Shinsuke Nakamura was. I mean, just how WWE completely bastardized him throughout the 2010s. And mind you, he had even a solid run on NXT. You know, like I said, I don't want to bring it up too much, but like the run that he had, you know, the initial match with Sami Zayn is it's an all-time classic in NXT. The debut match of his with Sami Zayn, and obviously the match he had with Bobby Roode as time started to go on, you know. And then he came to the main roster. And like, yeah, he had an initial strong run. We're talking about a former Royal Rumble winner, right? And then he had his match with AJ Styles during AJ Styles, one of his more historic reigns after, you know, the Jinder Mahal beat. After he beat Jinder Mahal, and, you know, it was just in the middle of that reign. AJ Styles' year-long reign as WWE champion. And, you know, it didn't really phase out too well. You know, ended up being what it was. And Shinsuke Nakamura ended up having some of his worst matches with AJ Styles in WWE, which is crazy. Because if you watch the Wrestle Kingdom match back in like 2016, like it's unfathomable that these two guys had these two separate matches. Like it's fucking wild. And like I said, as time started to go on, yes, he is a former Intercontinental champion. Yes, he's a former United States champion. Yes, he's a former tag team champion with, I think, Cesaro. But even with all his accolades, right? He literally has done everything but become a world champion. It still pales into comparison what he did with New Japan Pro Wrestling, and like how WWE just took such a run and just bastardized it in the way that they did. Because that's what they did. You can try to sugarcoat it as much as you want. They bastardized his run completely. And, you know, Shinsuke is what he is right now. And it's a damn shame if you ask me. But that New Japan role was fucking goated. And him as the Intercontinental champion, maybe arguably the greatest Intercontinental champion in New Japan Pro Wrestling history, it's enough to get him on the list. I did it again! Fuck! Number 42. Goldberg. Devontae, how do you have him so low on? It's going to be the complete opposite, right? Like Shinsuke, why do you have him so high on the list? Why do you have Goldberg so low on the list? Because, like I said, when it comes to the 2000s and the 21st century, that's what I'm focused on. That's what I'm focused on. I'm not focusing on the 90s. Yeah, if you bring up Goldberg's 97, 98, 99 run, and you were able to do that in the 2000s, dude will probably be top 10. Easily, for sure. He's fucking Goldberg. But all we got from Goldberg was a shitty run from WCW in 2000 and what I thought was a pretty damn solid run in 2003. And the fact that he's even on this list, based strongly off of what he did in 2003, that should probably speak volumes to how fucking over and how crazy popular he was. Because it only took 1 year. It took 1 year of dominance from Goldberg on one brand, the Raw brand. He never wrestled on SmackDown. Maybe he snuck on SmackDown. I'm not sure about that. Maybe sometime between that and WrestleMania 20 with the Brock Lesnar feud. But as far as him wrestling, he never wrestled on SmackDown. He only wrestled on Raw. Only Raw in 2003. 1 year. And quite frankly, he only had maybe 3 feuds, right? 3 prominent feuds. Jericho, Evolution, more in particular Triple H, and Brock Lesnar. That's it. That's it. And what an impact it was. You know, truth be told, I think Goldberg, for me at least, I got to think about it. I think Goldberg was the first time I ever seen someone spear the barricade. I have to go back in the past and I have to go, recount some stuff. But I think the Goldberg match with Jericho at Bad Blood back in 2003, that was the first time I think I ever witnessed a barricade break. And I didn't see it again till Sheamus and Mark Henry at SummerSlam in 2011. And then I seen it one more time like a year and a half later at TLC 2012 with The Shield and Danielson and Ryback and Kane. And now it's just completely overdone. Like, it's done in every fucking match, right? But Goldberg, from my understanding, from my recollection, was the first one to do the spear against the padded. I mean, maybe it was done with the guardrails, but I don't think I've ever seen it with the padded barricade to see it get knocked down in that way, right? So there's another inspiration for you right there. And yeah, he was in the midst of the reign of terror that was Triple H and his stupid pants, because at the time Triple H won some tight nut-hugging pants, some briefs. I don't know what I knew it was for us because he had a groin injury at the time, and that was his best way to, hide it or hide maybe any scars or something like that or whatever. Maybe it helped him out with that. But Goldberg, in that time frame, after the impact he had with Chris Jericho and what he did to Goldust when he speared the fuck out of him. Still one of the gnarliest fucking spears of all time is what he did to Christian when he fucking completely wrecked him when he picked up that chair and tried to attack him with it. And yeah, he had the Elimination Chamber match with him falling down during his pyro and him getting in the cage and completely destroying everybody just to get taken out with a fucking headshot from a sledgehammer, which logically could work and logically should work, but it just, goes to show you how popular Goldberg was to be that pounded by everybody's throats, right? And he's a former World Heavyweight Champion. He won it from Triple H, I believe, at Unforgiven in a career versus career match, or, if a career versus title match, I guess. And, he had a fun match at the Survivor Series to retain it from Triple H. Then he had the triple threat match with Kane and Triple H for Triple H to get it right back. And then he had the feud with Brock Lesnar, obviously. And that led into one of the worst. I thought the feud with Goldberg, Brock, and Stone Cold Steve Austin. I actually thought the feud was actually kind of fun. It was just the match that led into WrestleMania that wasn't really fun at all. But nevertheless, though, it was impactful enough, in my opinion, how popular he was, how everybody was waiting for him since the invasion angle, and then you get a Kevin Nash in 2002, then eventually you got Ric Flair first, then you got Kevin Nash, then you got Scotty. I'll take that. You got DDP first, then you got Booker, then you got Flair, then you got Nash, then you got Steiner. You got everybody but 2 people, Sting and Goldberg. And Sting didn't show up for another damn near, 10, 11 years afterwards? So Goldberg was the next best bet. And say whatever you will, he didn't have a strong run in the 2000s, but he had a damn strong run in 2003. And that's good enough to get him on this. And that's good enough. I'm not doing it. And finally, to round off this batch, this list, before we make it to the top 40 of the biggest wrestlers of the 21st century, we have the Hardy Boys. What more can I say? So this is where the bias is going to come out of me now. But I think I put them in the appropriate spot. Given their legacy and given the people who are above them, I think I have the Hardy Boys in the appropriate spot. But this is where the fanboy is going to come out of me, right? Because, as you guys know, I think I've talked about this before in the past. I don't really sugarcoat it. I don't make any bones about it. The Hardy Boys is by far, not even close, my favorite tag team of all time. I am a diehard Hardy Boys mark. I am a diehard Team Extreme mark with Lita. I love me the Hardy Boys. Me and my brother. I will tell a story about that as time goes on, but I will eventually get to that story with me and my brother pretending to be the Hardy Boys and my brother breaking his leg on a vase. I will tell that story as time goes on later on in the year, right? Or maybe next year. The Hardy Boys. Boy, where do I start with them? So we're starting off with the 2000s, right? We're going to start with the 2000s, but obviously, man, like the Edge and Christian stuff that pretty much started in 99, brother versus brother, coming out of SummerSlam in 1999 with that incredible, it was a 3-minute match, bro. Maybe even a 2-minute match in that gauntlet. And the amount of shit they were able to pull off in that match at SummerSlam 99, just giving you a taste. Then the Best of 5 series that ended up being the TIT tournament. Yes, that was the real name. It stood for Terry Invitational Tournament, but they called it TIT because it's 1999. And they had one of the most inspirational, most influential ladder matches, one of the most influential matches of all time in their ladder match, right? And then we get to the 2000s, which is where we're going to start off from. And as time started to go on with the Hardy Boys, we started more and more, because for all you can say about Edge and Christian and the Dudley Boys and all the TLC stuff, it was the Hardy Boys and the spots that they were doing the majority of the time in all these matches that put these matches over the top, right? And obviously, you know, the Hardy Boys and the Dudley Boys at the Royal Rumble 2000 and their Tornado Tag Team match, or Tornado Table Tag Team match. And it's only a 10-minute match. But man, it's a 10-minute. When I tell you, if you just need time, like say you're on your break at work and you just need a quick 10 minutes to just watch something, just turn on that match. It's so good. It's so easy to sit through, and it's so fast, not time consuming at all, man. What a fantastic thing. I love that match so much. I love that match. And even the singles matches without any gimmicks, like the match they had with Edge and Christian at No Way Out 2000, another fucking fantastic match. I truly think in 2000 the Hardy, no one could touch, from a tag team standpoint, no one could touch the Hardy Boys in the year 2000. No company, nowhere in this business could you touch Matt and Jeff. No one. From the wrestling standpoint, they had it all down packed, right? We'll get to the TLC stuff in a little bit, but from the wrestling stuff, down pat. From the charisma, come on, man. Come on. From the influence, Bayley is a wrestler because of the Hardy Boys. You guys know this, right? AJ Lee is a wrestler because of the Hardy Boys. Two of the most prominent women that probably brought in half of the women talent who now are in NXT. Like, literally any woman who was like 25 and younger came into wrestling because of Bayley and AJ Lee in some shape or form. Like, that's literally half of the NXT roster. The two women who inspired all those women became wrestlers because of the Hardy Boys and Lita. That's why they're here. That's why they're wrestlers. Bayley in particular is a wrestler because of Matt and Jeff and Lita. Who, by the way, that's who we get to next, because they eventually did pick up Lita, right? S.A. Rios was, doing some crazy shit, DV type stuff, even though they weren't dating or presented as being dating. My point being is, though, Lita eventually joined the Hardy Boys and they got even more over. When I tell you they were a part of pop culture, the whole MTV audience, the whole TRL stuff, the Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian, the shirts being taken off, the girls going fucking crazy. They were like boy bands, looking like boy bands, and like fucking Blink 182 and all that other shit with the piercings and looking like the lead singer from Incubus or whatever. Like, that was the style that they were going with. And then Jeff with the colorful hair. they were so in touch with pop culture at that time. Like the pop punk phrase with Avril Lavigne, and Lita was pretty much leading that way as well. The Town Boy stuff, like the Pink stuff. I can't stress this enough. There was no wrestler, no wrestling team or wrestler who were in touch with the times quite like the Hardy Boys were in the year 2000. And then obviously you throw in the ladder matches. You throw in the TLC match at SummerSlam, and obviously especially WrestleMania. And then all the stuff that they did as time started to go on, how influential they were. Of course, bro. They are arguably the most popular tag team of all time. They are arguably the most successful tag team of all time. They are arguably the most influential tag team of all time. Seriously, there are women who are wrestlers because of the Hardy Boys. There are men who are wrestlers because of the Hardy Boys. There are teams who started because they love the Hardy Boys. Again, you look at the Young Bucks. They're a perfect example of that. Hell, you look at AEW in general. You know, like, their company is literally built off the foundation of what the Dudley Boys, Edge and Christian, and the Hardy Boys started. It was them who gave even the inspiration for wrestlers to do what they did for AEW to even be a thing. There will never be another team like the Hardy Boys. There will never be a team who is that much in touch with reality and with pop culture, who can seamlessly not just be within pop culture and relate to all the teenagers who are watching, but be as influential within the scene without being too cringe about it. You know what I mean? But that's going to do it with number 41. And we are now entering the top 40. Getting closer and closer to that number one spot. And yeah, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below as to how you felt about the people you've seen on the list today. Anybody who will switch around, or who will you do? I kind of feel like this middle portion is probably going to be the more controversial one because of the spots that I have on the list and who is above who on this one. I promise you, 40 going to number one, there's no controversy in that. You should be expecting these people in the top 40, and you should be expecting them in their spots. And I kind of feel like even below 60, I feel like that was kind of like, you know, like, okay, I can see why you put them there. But 41 through 60, I know there's going to be a lot of people saying, you could have moved this here, move this here, move this here. And I understand, but, you know, just my list, and it's just how I feel about it. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. As always, I will be seeing you guys next week, or once again, if you're watching this in the future, playlist is down below on the homepage. Adeuces and a P ice.